All right, welcome to the Latest.com show. I'm Igor Darish. Joining us, he's a military vet and Latest.com senior political analyst from Pittsburgh, Josh Patton. And he's a 24-year veteran of the U.S. State Department, the author of We Meant Well from New York, Peter Van Buren. Well, this time last night, we all expected Hillary Clinton to sweep Mississippi and Michigan, and it didn't go that way. Even though every poll out of Michigan showed Hillary up by more than 20 points, some had her within 11 or 12. Bernie ended up eking out a win, won by 2 points. Some people are comparing it to the New Hampshire Democratic primary in 2008 where Hillary upset Obama. But even then, Obama was leading by about 8 points and lost by 3. In this case, almost every poll conducted in Michigan had Bernie down by 20. Josh, have you ever seen any race where that was 20 points apart the day before and swung that dramatically on Election Day?
No. In fact, I think it was Nate Silver of 538 who said last night that, if Bernie wins, this represents perhaps the biggest public polling failure in history of the practice, which makes sense. And I feel like that, of course, as something for Bernie supporters to be mad about. The story isn't so much that Bernie won, which is amazing, but it's, how did this happen? Because he was, so much of the conventional wisdom suggested that Hillary Clinton was going to win this one easily. There's some cool theories like, the fact that Bernie just campaigned so hard in the state. There were areas in outside of like Flint and Detroit where the Sanders campaign went 5-6 times and Hillary Clinton didn't even show up at all. There were also reports of people saying that they would have voted for Hillary, but because they thought she had it in the bag, they went and cast anti-Trump votes because it was an open primary. And then there's also the fact that the debate happened Sunday night. All the polls ended Sunday. The debate happened Sunday night. And it was a really big debate, even though I don't know, I kind of felt like it was a pretty typical debate, but apparently it had an incredible effect because it swung some people in Bernie's camp who might not have been there otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to envision that a debate had that much of an impact, though. In 538, which you mentioned, they gave Bernie like a 99% chance of losing Michigan the night before. Peter, why do you think the polls got it so wrong, considering early on, I mean, even in hard-to-poll places like Nevada, we saw fairly bad polling firms still come in with pretty reliable numbers?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to look, I think, deeper into how these polls are conducted. And I don't know the details of how these particular polls were, but a lot of them still are based on landline phones. And that clearly does not connect, double pun, to Bernie's core supporters, mostly young people who are probably cell-based. So that's one question. Second, I think a lot has to do with the nature of these polls. Who's going to give straight-up answers? Who's going to get on the phone and answer and respond to these things? Again, cell phone people oftentimes are very wary about taking calls from numbers they don't know. So I think some of it may have to do with the technology. If they do more internet-based polling, I think that may be more useful. If they did more social media analysis, that may get at some of these things. But be careful that we blame the polls too much. It may be, in fact, that people were, in fact, shifted and convinced by some of the things they heard in the debate, which were amplified out over the next 24, 36 hours.
Still, it's hard to envision that big a swing just from one debate, and it's hard to see how none of the polls picked up any kind of trend moving towards Bernie.
Well, one mistake that Peter didn't mention, I think, is just, and you can finish with your thought in a moment. I just want to say that polls always go after likely voters, and Bernie won with a lot of unlikely voters. So I think that's part of the reason too. A huge chunk of his support base was just they weren't even asked the question.
Yeah, and so
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, a combination of polling, a combination of out-of-date technology, and throw in a few minds that were changed by the information in the debate. The debate itself was one thing, but the stuff about Hillary lying about Bernie's position on the auto bailout, for example, that kind of information, in a state like Michigan, that's the issue that people follow, and that kind of stuff moves very quickly through the system.
Yeah, well, I mean, turnout had a big part to do with it. Voters under 30 made up more than 20% of the voters last night. Independents made up more than 20% of the voters last night. Those are the groups he usually does well with. He crushed her among voters 18 to 44 by a 67 to 32 margins. One independents, one those making under 100,000. But unlike the Southern poll numbers we've seen, he won 35% of the black vote, which is not great, but considerably more than we've seen in like Mississippi and Louisiana and Georgia, where she's winning with like 80% of the, or by 80%. So, you know, we talk about the black vote a lot. And Peter, why do you think Hillary failed to win over her typical amount of black supporters in Michigan compared to the places in the South where she's just? Yeah, go ahead.
To be quite honest, I've never fully understood the support of African Americans for Hillary Clinton. And I very much like to hear you guys' thoughts on that. But from what I do understand, there's a couple of things that help her appeal to African American voters. One of which, again, I'm just pulling this stuff off the internet. I have no black friends whatsoever to ask about these things. I mean, and when I stop people on the street, I just, you know, they say, "Are you a cop? Well, you know, what's up?" But seriously, I mean, two things keep coming up in the stuff I've been able to kind of parse out, and one is that a lot of African American voters are upset by Bernie's quote unquote attacks against Obama, and that their loyalty to America's first black president and the woman who serves essentially as his vassal in this election, Hillary, there's some connections there. The other, and this may be more applicable in Michigan, is that Hillary has put in a lot of groundwork on African American voters. She shows in South Carolina, for example, she showed up at a lot of churches, a lot of small events, whereas Bernie has not been doing that in the African American community, though his people apparently did do a lot more outreach, small scale outreach, but a lot of it in Michigan. So that may have something to do with it. We might as well just throw in the idea that when we kind of throw together this concept of all African Americans, it's pretty disingenuous to group that large a group of folks into one sort of bucket.
Well, certainly we expected younger black voters to go for Bernie, but we didn't really see that in the South, where, again, she would win with like 90% of the black vote. And here you see that she only got about 65%. Josh, I mean, she made Flint one of the big kind of top points in her campaign, spent a lot of time in Michigan. Why do you think she won so much less of the black vote here, considering that would have pretty much put her over the top?
Well, unlike Peter, I am beloved in the black community, who I can assure you love to be referred to as, yes, they're a hat-loving group of people, and they love to be talked about as like one giant monolithic group. It's their favorite.
By three white guys. Yeah, I know.
Yes. I think there were two things about Hillary Clinton, about Hillary Clinton among black voters and why it shifted a little in Michigan. And there's the support from black voters, I think, actually comes from, you know, what everyone thinks it comes from, which is just the history that the Clinton family itself has as kind of a champion of causes important to black voters. We love to look back in hindsight at the 1994 crime bill and the disastrous 96 welfare reform. I mean, both of those things really, really sucked. At the time, they weren't as controversial as they are now. So that's, you know, it's a little disingenuous to sort of paint the crime bill as like this obviously bad idea that was going to balloon mass incarceration when it really wasn't. I mean, maybe it was and people just weren't listening, but again, that wasn't sort of
the crime bill,
how people felt about it at the time.
Yeah, the crime bill was passed at a time where, I mean, we really did have one of the worst crime epidemics that this country's ever seen. And even that, I mean, it increased incarceration among federal prisoners. If we released every federal prisoner tomorrow, we'd still have more than 2 million people in state and local prisons. So it really
right. I think it's like 0.2% prison reduction if we released every federal prisoner. And the other thing too is, remember, Hillary Clinton was the first lady, and during Bill Clinton's term, the first, or any president's term, the first lady does all the bullshit. Like, they go out to the communities and they shake the hands and they're there saying, look at how lovely this place is, or this lovely person, and this is my cause. So, CHIP was a big deal. Got a lot of kids insured. Hillary Clinton went to a lot of these neighborhoods in South Carolina, in Illinois. So they saw her there as the first lady in the neighborhood, and that is a powerful sort of image to folks, that that the first lady is there, and it brings a kind of spotlight that up until that point Americans weren't really used to seeing, Black Americans specifically. Now to Detroit or to Michigan, I think two things that happened was, one, Michigan is unique in that trade and class and economics even trumps race in that state, because they were once, the Bahrain of the Midwest because of the auto industry. They're just rolling in money, and now it's a proverbial ghost town. So I think the trade, NAFTA, things like that had a lot to do with it. So Clinton's attack on Sanders, plus her tricky history with trade anyway, might have fucked her a little in that end of things. And then to the debate answer that Bernie Sanders gave about poverty, and the one he got tagged on for saying white people don't know how to be poor, that was how white people heard it. A lot of more progressive-minded folks and some of my actual, Black friends who I talked to about politics noticed that was one of the first times they had ever heard a major candidate for any office acknowledge, even if not explicitly, the existence of white privilege. And that went, I think, a long way towards making the kind of inroads that up until now Bernie Sanders seemed incapable of making with voters outside of his economic message. So it'll be interesting to see if Sanders is able to, maintain that kind of campaign style into Ohio, Pennsylvania, and some of these other contests, because, it's really a ball game now.
Yeah, it's interesting
Bernie did make the labor union stance on the TPP, NAFTA, trade a really big part of this campaign in Michigan, which we really haven't seen that much coming in. So now, like Josh said, we're going to Ohio, we're going to Illinois, Missouri. Peter, does this make you think that maybe he does have a chance in these Rust Belt Midwest states next Tuesday?
Absolutely. I think what, Josh was touching on a very important point, and that is people's identity, if you will, is made up of different factors. And in places like South Carolina, race is a predominant part of someone's identity. Black, white, things like that. It goes back to a long history of racial discrimination, things like that. But when you get to Michigan, people's identity may be made up of different points, and at some level, the concept of blue collar, the people who were screwed over by NAFTA, people who lost their jobs overseas, that identity may in fact push past race. If that is accurate, then that puts Bernie in a very positive place coming up to states like Pennsylvania and Ohio, and to a certain extent Illinois, where people were burned over in the 1990s by the same forces that burned over Detroit and larger Michigan. That bodes well for Bernie in those places, and it'll be very interesting to keep an eye on that, particularly among groups like African Americans or evangelicals, or pick the group that you want and see if they stress that identity or in fact go with the industrial, the blue collar, or the persons left behind when the economy moved in a different direction.
Well, months ago, we said that Bernie didn't have a chance against Hillary. He was polling at 2%, and now he's pretty competitive in almost every state. And yesterday we said he'd get crushed in Michigan, and he managed to win. Now, did we maybe announce Hillary's inevitability a bit too early once again? And is there a path for a nomination, Josh, even though she lost, Michigan still got more delegates than him on the night?
Yeah, I mean, I love how stunningly wrong we can be, and I say with full confidence, Hillary Clinton has this in the bag. Oh yeah, completely. Like, again, that's why I love this election, because shit does keep happening to surprise us. If Bernie Sanders is going to supplant Clinton's lead in pledge delegates, now super delegates, it is an insurmountable lead almost. But super delegates are politicians mostly, And with a contested convention likely for the Republicans, the Democratic convention, if they have any sense at all, so this is probably unlikely, will be a smooth, simple process that makes it look like a well-oiled machine, because the Republican convention is going to be chaos. I personally would like to see, knife fights at both conventions. I think voters would want to see that. It makes it more interesting anyway. But no, unless Bernie Sanders starts being able to beat Hillary Clinton by some of the margins she's been beating him at, he's never going to get over her lead in pledged delegates. He came out 7 or 10 delegates ahead in Michigan, and then Hillary got 20 or more out of Mississippi. So it's, unless he's able to start racking up a couple 2-1 victories, he's going to, at best, maybe tie her or do that thing where they keep them from getting enough to get the nomination. But in this case, the Democrats have the superdelegates, which to put her over the edge, which they absolutely will do that.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, on NBC today, the Bernie campaign was talking about how he could win the big late states like New York, like California. And she does currently lead him by about 20 points in New York. The last poll out of California, which hasn't really been polled, has her up by double digits there as well. Peter, what about these late deciding states like those two, New Jersey, Pennsylvania? Can Bernie pull off upsets in those the way he did in Michigan to maybe make up for the weakness that he has in the southern states?
It's going to be very difficult for him because, every week that goes by, he's either up or he's down. I mean, he's still standing, and that's very impressive at this point in time. If the count is, I'm a little confused, but I believe that on pledged delegates, Hillary is ahead by 200 some. Yeah. Does that strike you as all realistic? So let's set the superdelegates aside for just a moment. The thing is that next week, there's, I think, 691 delegates in play. And these are winner-take-all states, including big monsters.
Not on the Democratic side, only on the Republican side.
On the Republican side. But you've got a lot of votes in play.
Yeah.
Certainly, Bernie can scoop up enough to keep the campaign alive. But he can also slip up next week and put himself in that hole that's going to get harder and harder to climb out of. California is going to be a tough place for him to do well. New York, he's from Brooklyn. He may be able to pull some votes there. He may have more supporters there. I mean, Hillary is, allegedly a New Yorker. The thing is that he's on a week-to-week ventilator, I'm afraid to say. And he's always one bad week away from slipping under the water and not really be able to come back. The superdelegates obviously are a huge issue as well. But in terms of just keeping the game alive, keeping himself on his feet, you measure his life expectancy in very short chunks.
Yeah, well, next week we're going to have Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, Illinois, and Missouri. And I mean, he's competitive in the Midwest states, but he's also going to get crushed in Florida and probably North Carolina as well. So we're going to be talking about the other side of this next week about how, well, isn't he done again? It's all about narrative. All right, on the Republican side, Donald Trump won 3 out of the 4 states, and but as of right now, he's only up by about a couple dozen. He only got a couple dozen more delegates than Ted Cruz got. He finished second in every single primary and caucus. The Republican Party is supposedly trying to rally the troops and the money to try to stop Trump, but it doesn't seem to be working, Josh. And I mean, even though Cruz isn't behind Trump that much, he's only about 100 delegates behind. With the winner-take-all states coming up, can the GOP do enough to help Cruz in any of these crucial contests? And finishing second is not going to help him anymore.
Well, the funny thing is that Kasich and Rubio are in a weird position now where they pretty much both know they have to get out of the race. I mean, especially for Rubio, it's got to be clear now that this was just...
Kasich has to stay in until at least Ohio.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. They have to stay in. Rubio has to stay in because he's going for Florida, and Cruz is foolishly making a play for Florida, which is really dumb. And Ohio, which Kasich is almost surely going to take. So I think that it's going to be tough for them to justify their existence in the campaign beyond we're here to stop Trump for this state and this state alone. And then, of course, if they do win, if they don't get a bug in their ear and go, you know what, I'm going to keep going. So I don't see how the Cruz wing, Kasich Rubio wing, and the Trump wing, I don't see how they stop the dynamic that they have now. So I think that this is going to continue, and it is going to get to the place where Trump is going to be winning these winner-take-all states and have the nomination locked up. I think that, again, 6-8 months ago, I would have laughed from my gut, like legitimately belly laughed if I had said that that's what you're going to say in March of 2016. But I don't see any realistic way without a 1968 level controversy convention that Donald Trump is not the nominee. I just don't see it.
I have to,
and that could be depression, Stockholm syndrome. I don't know. I admit that my analysis in this regard might be suspect because it comes through tears and shame.
Yep. I take Zoloft, so I have a much clearer view of these things. 6 or 8 months ago, Trump was indeed, as Josh said, a punchline. And the thing is, he still is a punchline, except he's winning. And that second part of it is just so hard to kind of get around. It seems very, very hard to imagine someone beating Trump at this point, a Republican beating Trump for the nomination, absent some kind of outside event that is, by its nature, unpredictable. Rubio is a week or so away from obscurity. Kasich, largely the same. They may or may not hang around for a while, but it's like Jeb. At some point we all knew he was dead. He just wouldn't lie down. And that's the same thing, certainly for Rubio and probably for Kasich. Cruz, as you said, he doesn't have a prayer in Florida. He won his big state in Texas. It's hard to see what he's going to come up with that it's going to allow him to pull past Trump. Like I said, absent some outside event beyond, you just can't predict.
Well, if we can get theoretical, if Cruz were to, if Rubio and Kasich were to drop out right this second, then Cruz could make a real run for it because he would have the section, because again, Donald Trump is segmenting the lunatic wing of the party. There's a division there. And so he's going to get his chunk of those guys, and then he's also going to get all of the people who are just not Trump like that. So he will, maybe not all, because again, there's plenty not Cruzes out there too. So I think that's the real sort of trick, is if this does become a two-man race, who do the non-lunatics go for? If they can line up behind Cruz, Cruz maybe has a shot to take it. But, if they're like, well, Donald Trump wants to kill civilians, but Ted Cruz wants to do it only for Jesus, I guess I'm picking Trump. I forget the name of the sort of rhetorical term for the terrible choice, but it's that terrible choice that you can't possibly make.
It's amazing. We now talk about the lunatics as a demographic, but it's accurate.
Let's talk about that punchline aspect to Trump's campaign Peter mentioned. After his win last night, Trump staged one of the most bizarre news conferences that turned infomercial that I've ever seen. It was an infomercial for businesses that don't even exist. He talked about Trump steaks last night while using steaks from a company that had nothing to do with Trump or any of his organizations. And then he went on about Trump Water and Trump Vodka and Trump Magazine, which were essentially out of business. He found some copy of Trump Magazine and I don't know, some intern printed out somewhere and said, look, it exists. And then he talked about Trump Winery, which isn't even his business. His kid has an estate in the South with some wine. Peter, what did she make of that bizarre press conference for products you can't even buy?
Yeah, I feel bad for the intern who was on eBay till 2 a.m. trying to track down that Trump Magazine cover. It's so beyond rational discussion. You say it over and over, but it's who could possibly have imagined that any of these things would be happening? You could take the bright side and say, well, he didn't talk about his dick, so we moved ahead. Now he's just stumping for, as you said, businesses that don't exist. Trump is just having the greatest time. You look at someone like Hillary, and you just look at somebody like Hillary, for whom, the campaign process just seems like such a nuisance. It just seems like such a chore for her. Bernie, the same thing. I mean, he carries so much anger and weight around with him. Every speech, you feel like he's going to blow an aneurysm, and that's going to be it. Same Cruz, the same thing. They don't seem to be enjoying themselves. And then there's Trump, who is just, forgive it, I mean, whipping these things out and having the greatest time. He's like a performance artist. And he's absolutely convinced that it doesn't matter what he says or does. And so far, he's been remarkably right when we, the collective pundit class, have been wrong pretty much on a one-to-one basis with Trump being right.
I mean, Josh, doesn't this just come off as petty, though? I mean, someone made fun of his wee-wee, so he made a big thing about it at Fox News debate. Someone made fun of his businesses that failed, even though he still has somewhere like over $4 billion worth of stuff. He has to pump out, someone else's steaks and call them Trump steaks.
Again, it's so amazing. I watched it, and I thought, like, this must be what going mad feels like, because I knew what I was seeing couldn't be part of a presidential press conference, but I was seeing it on all the screens. The thing about it that's amazing, and this is why Trump is winning, because he is the best at, he loves the poorly educated because they make him work. Because what happens is Mitt Romney comes out and very soberly and like even politely, even by pre-Trump standards, the meanest thing he said was Trump is very not smart. It was the worst diss track anyone's ever released. But again, he attacks his businesses, and so Trump stages this elaborate thing to be like, look at all this success, look at all these businesses, and then he's going to do the thing he always does when I'm sure he's inevitably confronted about the fact that, hey, those steaks weren't Trump steaks. And he'll say, what do I know? I was out winning elections. I come in, they have steaks here. They tell me they're Trump steaks. How am I supposed to? And that'll be fine. It'll be fine. And that's the magic of Trump, that he is able to do these things and people go, see, Mitt Romney, see. And remember, he got shellacked in Idaho amongst Mormons. So perhaps the last demographic in America that Mitt Romney carries great influence with, but it showed that it was a thing. Like, I can imagine that the fact that, where Trump was winning in Idaho absolutely lined up with where Mormons weren't, was kind of a thing that he recognized as perhaps a problem. So what does he do? He goes out, destroys the credibility of the guy who criticized him, and then when it turns out that that's all a sham, he'll just go, I came out, the table was there. What do you do? That's what he's going to say, and they'll be like, well, thank you for your time, Mr. Trump.
The thing about Trump, and I think this may help us be more accurate in our predictions of things, is that he's following, pro wrestling WWE model for this. And so you've got a couple of threads. The narrative has to be very simple. Good guy, bad guy. Shouldn't be hard to tell them apart. That's it. Second, it doesn't really matter what you do as long as you provide some entertainment. And then the third one, of course, is that you've got to top yourself every week. And that's what Trump is doing. He's good. Everyone else is bad or stupid or whatever. The narrative is very, very simple. It doesn't really matter if it's true or not. It's just entertaining. And then, like I said, every week he's got a topper. And you just tune in to see what's going to happen next. The show is predictable, like professional wrestling is. But that's part of the fun. You can watch it stoned. You can watch it while you're doing something else. You can talk about it with your friends. I'm sure all across America, none of us have jobs or friends, but if you had a job in an office, I'm sure people are saying things like, did you hear what Trump said last night? And he's got that. He understands it. Those are his people. That's his meme. And these other guys just sort of bounce off him like he's a big inflatable. They just can't figure out how to touch him.
One of the most startling numbers I saw last night was on, I don't know, I think it was in Mississippi or Michigan, one of those. Trump supporters said that 90% of Trump supporters said that he's the most honest and trustworthy candidate in the race. Josh, they've been calling it a movement. Isn't this more of a cult now?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It is very culty. And part of it, I wonder, like, some of it might be culty, and some of it might be that thing that people do when they're a fan of something where they imitate it. I remember when I was, going to Iraq, there was the big thing was that we listened to the syndicated, it was the Opie and Anthony show. And all they did was bring on comedians and make fun of Howard Stern. And the comedians all insulted each other, and it was a good time. And then, by the end of the month, we were sitting there doing nothing but rolling around in the woods and listening to this shit. We were insulting each other the exact same way. So I think that it's something like that. These people are saying, they probably think, Trump is a liar, but he's not as big a liar as Ted Cruz or someone else. But that's not how you say it in Trump speak. You say it, he's the most honest, most best person in the world. So it might be something like that, or it might be legitimate Jim Jones, let's go to Africa, build a town kind of cult. I don't know, though. I have no idea, and that's why this is fascinating and terrifying at the same time. And it's amazing because he's trained his supporters to not trust the media and to not, do you think it was an accident last night that no one could hear the questions in the press conference? No, that was deliberate.
Yeah, that's been the case.
Because he wanted, because he wants people to have these questions, so when he wants to avoid it, he can just say, no, Jeremy, no, Jeremy. And then you're like, who is Jeremy? And what's he talking about? So I don't know. I mean, you would think there would have to be something. There would have to be something that would sort of wake people up to at least the reality of it. But I don't know. This is a messianic election because it's happening on the left too. There are people who, there are people incredibly angry at black people in the South because they're voting for Hillary Clinton. They're saying like, how dare you vote against your self-interest? Don't you know what's best for you? We do. I mean, that's like the exact opposite of what you would think the progressive argument would be. But no one's thinking rationally. They want, Jesus Bernie or Jesus Trump to ascend to the presidency like, after Easter and to rule for 1,000 years. That politics is becoming very religious-y right now, and it is almost concerning. I mean, it's still a little funny, but it's getting into the concerning territory.
But let's go back to Trump as trustworthy, because we may be confusing two different things here. Trump makes a joke about how he doesn't know facts. He'll hire people who know facts. And the stuff he sort of the factual stuff he lies about is a lot of it is just ridiculous shit. Like the way that lawsuits are going, or his famous steaks last night or whatever. I mean, these are not really substantive issues per se. But the thing that people seem to trust Trump on, and again, this is part of getting your message, your narrative down to something very, very simple, is I'm going to be a badass who's going to, run this country in a tough, mean, business-like way out of the White House. Trust me on that. That's the kind of thing that, for example, Hillary is doing exactly the opposite of. She keeps trying to put out facts and lies about them. The thing about the auto bailout and a lot of the Democratic debates, end up in these kind of weird, Bernie plays into this too, these weird kind of wonky things about Glass-Steagall. I mean, nobody knows what these things are. The message is complex. It gets twisted. You get people arguing about the provisions of NAFTA or something like that. Trump stands up and says, NAFTA is bad. The reason you're poor and stupid is because of NAFTA. And
when I'm president, there'll be a reverse NAFTA that'll make you rich again. That is exactly right, Peter. Yes.
Exactly. And that is a classic bit of demagoguery. It's a classic thing. Josh Brink brought up that this is becoming religious. I mean, it's a classic kind of religious thing. Your life is terrible now, but when you die, you'll go to heaven and it's going to be paradise. And believe me, because I'm the preacher. And I mean, that's the kind of thing that religious demagogues have used for probably centuries. And Trump understands this. And the other candidates, including Bernie Sanders, really don't understand how Trump is running a different race than everybody else, including both parties.
You mentioned.
I just want to build on that a quick second. Just a quick second is that I think Peter's absolutely right, because when it comes to trustworthiness, I mean, he says these are Trump stakes and they're not Trump stakes. People don't probably really care about that. But what he does this, I mean, it's how he frames every issue. This thing sucks. This is the person or the reason why it sucks. And when you elect me, I'm going to make it better because I make things good because that's what I do. And when he says it that way, people think, they go, hey, that thing does suck. And hey, you know what, that reason of that person, they are kind of fucked up for why that thing sucks. I am going to vote for Trump. Like, so that, I think it's right. Trustworthiness has nothing to do with facts or information. I mean, finally, the dream has been achieved. It's taken, 200 plus years, but finally we've gotten democracy to where they wanted it.
The great experiment is now over.
It's just all gut now. It's all gut. It's not even anything about facts or logic. It's all gut.
Look at how you sell soap. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. You're a complete loser. Girls don't like you. But if you buy this shaving cream or this deodorant, then everything's going to be okay. It's actually very simple, and you can solve it with a vote.
Peter, what's this shaving cream called again? I'm just asking for a friend.
Oh, yeah, let me tell you about it. The stuff is amazing. So,
just send me money to my PayPal. I'll get you a case.
Yeah. No, I got you, man. I got you. But that's it. Trump has caught on to the zeitgeist, and he's not playing the game everybody else is. Ted Cruz is going to have position papers and, go to my website and see my position on this or that. And Trump just stands back and is laughing at these guys. It's like, you guys are playing the game. You're playing right into my hands. Do you understand that? I'll just stand up here and riff all night while you guys confuse the voters.
I like the idea of Trump as the Axe body spray of candidates. But I'm not really surprised.
He could be like that naked guy selling Old Spice.
Yeah, that's another good example. I'm not surprised 90% of Trump supporters think that he's honest. Ironically, though, a lot of Hillary supporters don't think that she's honest, like not even close. And today in an NBC Wall Street Journal poll, Hillary's leading by 8 or 9 points over Trump in a national election. Despite that, more people believe Trump is honest than Hillary. Josh, how big a problem is this going to be if, he can overcome all this negativity and get to the general election?
What's crazy about this election, one of the many hundreds of things that is insane about this election is that normally as things go on, polling and things like that starts to sort of codify into how people are feeling for the general election. Now, to be fair, it is still early in the fact that, in terms of that there are plenty of elections left. But, normally at this point in the process, your primaries are wrapped up and it's into relaxation mode before the conventions. So since that's not the case, and since these polls are getting crazy, and, Hillary and Donald Trump are both favored to win, but also the most unfavorable candidates you could ever find. Trump beats Hillary, and and that switches depending on the poll. I think the real
Trump has only led her in like 2 or 3 polls. She leads him in like 90% of the others.
Doesn't matter what the facts are, Igor. Weren't you listening? But I think what that means is it doesn't matter. The polling. I mean, if Michigan wasn't the wake-up call, polling can still exist to give us maybe an idea, but we cannot rely on it sort of like we did. And I think that, if you have Hillary and Trump as actual nominees and then you redo that poll, things are going to be completely different. Because right now, it's just they're 2 very unique candidates. You have one of the most well-known and most polarizing political figures on one side. I mean, I think the only person more polarizing is maybe the current president. And honestly, that's just because Hillary hasn't been president yet. So you have that on one side. And then the other side, you have a complete buffoon who is also just as, if not more famous than the other person, that pretty much is famous for being a complete asshole and is beloved by the electorate. So I think that this is an election that is sort of, there's just no, you can only sit back and watch. Sit back and watch, figure out what happened, and that's what we'll be saying in the work camps in the latter 6 months of or in Donald Trump's first 100 days.
My point is that Trump supporters adamantly believe that this is the Messiah. He means what he says. He's the most honest person. Meanwhile, the people that even do say they will vote for Hillary also don't find her very honest and trustworthy. Peter, how big a problem is this going to be?
Well, it's huge. I mean, imagine this campaign devolving into basically defensive voting. I mean, there's Hillary supporters who won't budge.
Imagine.
Imagine, basically the line is each candidate says, you better vote for me or Selma and Patty are going to be president, or you better vote for me or Homer is going to end up as president. So when you get into that defensive fight where the goal is to paint the other candidate as the greater of two evils, now who do you think is going to be better at that? Trump beating up on Hillary, or Hillary trying to get a few shots in on Trump? It's pretty darn clear. You've also got what some people are starting to call the FBI primary that still is out there. Keep in mind that somewhat amazingly, the mainstream media and Bernie Sanders have completely ignored the multiple legal issues that are swirling in the background of the Clinton campaign. Nobody knows what's going to happen with any of those, but keep in mind that there is only one candidate in this election who has open investigations right now by the FBI. I think we can assume Trump is not going to stay away from that issue in the general campaign. And if Hillary's trustworthy scores are already trending as poorly as they are now, imagine what's going to happen when you've got Trump 24/7 talking about emails and things like that. And he's not going to allow Hillary to play the word games. I didn't send any marked classified. I didn't know this. It was legal when I did it and all that. Trump is just going to be going, balls to the wall about how you can't trust this woman. And that, given the way his campaign has been run and the way his message has resonated, man, nobody's going to do it better than him.
All right, well, let's talk about the math going forward into next Tuesday. So Marco Rubio, Josh's boy, who also has proven to be the worst candidate since Jeb Bush, was completely shut out last night. Didn't finish above 16% in any state, failed to get a single delegate.
Yeah.
There have been...
He did great in Puerto Rico, Igor. Mainstream media keeping that out of the headlines.
The North Mariana Island primary is
right.
It's either tonight or tomorrow.
It's a caucus. It's a caucus.
The goddamn international dateline is. So Rubio's still got that open.
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, Josh was saying that it's a bad move by Ted Cruz to try to make a play at Florida, but there have been multiple reports, which Rubio has denied, that he would drop out ahead of the Florida primary. He's getting crushed in the state in pretty much every poll, and the problem for him is going to be that according to the Florida State Department, already there's been 1.2 early ballots cast, and the majority of those are Republican. So even if Rubio goes and pulls some Bernie Sanders shit in Florida, it still might not be enough to cut into that deficit. Josh, what are the chances he will drop out before the Florida primary and maybe give the primary over to Ted Cruz, because he is a dud of a candidate?
I mean, no kidding, right? I seriously can't. Look, I'm more concerned about how I was fooled than what's going to happen in Florida. But no, I don't think he can. And the reason I don't think he can is because he staked his campaign on it. And if he did, That would be amazing. I mean, I think it would be very interesting if he were to drop out and make it just Cruz and Trump. But then again, you have Kasich jumping down from Ohio and going, yeah, you guys should probably vote for me. I'm up there in Ohio. You might as well. So he'll...
Pretty good.
I don't think it matters. I don't think it... I think Rubio stays in because Rubio has been told to stay in. And by that I mean, I'm sure Reince Priebus, every, donor, they're like, you have to try and make a play for Florida. Because again, if Trump wins Florida, if he splits the difference between Florida and Ohio, I don't think there's there's really no stopping him short of changing the convention rules, before it starts. If Rubio somehow manages to win Florida, it doesn't help Rubio. He drops out. Of course not. But I'm just saying, if he were to somehow pull that off, the conversation wouldn't be, Rubio's our guy now. It would just be, he stopped Trump. You may go now, Marco. And again, that's the thing. But I don't see what other than, what's going to all of a sudden now make them start working together when it's arguably too late for that to happen. I see that people stay in and then they try to make a dogfight of a convention. Like I said, I'm hoping that they do the rule change right before it starts and then it's just bedlam. God, would that be fun?
I mean, the Republican Party, as Josh put it, they're going to use Rubio as basically a suicide bomber in Florida. They're going to send him in to try to defeat Trump and he'll, blow himself up and nobody really particularly cares. There's also ego. This poor guy has been running for president all this time. He's gone from a position where he was considered a very serious runner for the nomination to, the Jeb Bush.
More like the dark horse favorite. Like he was like, oh, you think it'll be Jeb? Have you met Marco? He's like Jeb, but younger and Spanisher.
Yeah. His name was up there. He fell from a high place. And his ego is on the line. If he can walk away kind of imagining that he did something good in this whole thing, and if he has some delegates to bargain with at some point, whatever. But he's not going to drop out. The question is, will he be totally and completely humiliated in front of the entire nation if Trump beats him in Florida? That would be entertainment.
Well, I think the thing is, Rubio can't win Florida. It's looking more and more like he can't. He can't even finish above fourth in some of these other states. But the idea would be that if he gets out, would Ted Cruz then be able to take the vote? But the problem is, for the same reason that Rubio likely can't make up the deficit, is there's been so many votes already cast that even that then makes it a very improbable proposition. But Josh, Jeb Bush is expected.
And don't forget, you still have Kasich, who would be your not Trump option if you weren't already with Cruz.
Well, statistics, just based on what people say in polls, a lot of the Rubio voters' second choice is Ted Cruz. So not all, but I think like 2/3.
All right, fair enough.
Migrate to Cruz. That would be enough considering all the votes that were cast. But anyway, and Jeb Bush, the big Florida governor endorsement, is supposed to meet with all the candidates except Trump. Is Jeb actually going to endorse any of these guys, Josh, or do you think Jeb might actually do what we're talking about here and try to talk Rubio or maybe Kasich out of to drop out so that they can beat Trump?
I would pick the latter just because, or he might do one of those things where he comes out and endorses Rubio hard because he knows he's so unpopular that it'll push people to Cruz. I really don't think he's going to make an endorsement because, let's be honest. In Idaho, I think Kasich had the endorsement of like all the major newspapers and the governor, Butch Otter, whose name I learned last night. And Rubio had one of the senators from the state endorsement. And they got single digits? Did Rubio crack 20%?
No, he didn't crack 16 in any state. So, yeah, they didn't even qualify for delegates. So if Jeb Bush was going to, if Jeb Bush basically Kasich got like 17 delegates out of one of the
in Michigan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he somehow, like, Cruz was second, but he ended up with more delegates in the one chart I was looking at. But anyway, that's besides the point. I think that that what will happen is it's more likely that Jeb Bush is talking about circling the wagons than trying to endorse anyone, because seriously, what fucking good would his endorsement have done anyway?
Well, along with Florida, the other big winner-take-all one is Ohio, where Trump is up by a couple points. But John Kasich does have a lot of advantages in this race. He has the ground game because it's his state. His favorables in the state are more than 20% higher than Trump. And the late vote, the late deciders.
And he's almost always underestimated.
Yeah, and the late deciders in pretty much every GOP primary, regardless who they vote for, do go against Trump. At the same time, Trump does lead in pretty much every recent poll coming out. So, Peter, let's say Kasich can't stop Trump, and he wins both Ohio and Florida. Would the GOP then cave and embrace their new overlord, or are they going to continue fighting this shit until the convention?
I don't know what else the GOP really can do. It's a delegate count game in one sense, but it's also a popularity contest at some point. I mean, what would the GOP be able to do, and why would they possibly do it at this point? I mean, their game at that point is to try to see what they can do to control Trump, not to get rid of him. Figure out a way to try to get a decent, quote unquote, normal vice president in with him, whatever. But I mean, it's like, Jeb and Marco get together. It's like the goth kids trying to influence, who gets to be the quarterback or something. I mean, it just doesn't matter anymore. And the same with the GOP. At any point, Trump just basically says to the GOP, go fuck yourselves. And Trump always has the ultimate, the nuclear option of saying to the GOP, fine, you can nominate Ted Cruz. I'm going to run as an independent, and we can all watch Hillary be president for 8 years. Because, I mean, Trump can easily just shrug his shoulders and say, day after the election, I'm going to go back to being a businessman. You guys are going to be losers. So, no, the GOP has no choice.
Well, the scenario that's been floated by a number of people and a lot of different networks is the convention rules meeting that's coming up in April, and the Republican Party using that as a last ditch resort. Josh mentioned it earlier. So they're going to meet in April, and so they could change pretty much how the entire convention goes. First of all, as the rules state now, a candidate needs to win at least eight states to be considered for a nomination, which means that Romney, Paul Ryan, some of the people that others have brought up wouldn't be eligible, although they could change that. One other possibility is that the Rules Committee could change the delegate minimum, so even if Trump does get the 1237, it still wouldn't steal him the nomination. Josh? Do you think the GOP is willing to go that far?
I don't know. The other one that I heard, too, is that they just changed the rules saying delegates can vote for whoever they want on the first ballot. And,
right.
Then you get your 2/3, your Kasich and your Carsons and all those guys from the other states to just say not Trump, and that's the other way they do it. I don't know, because, again, it's the establishment, the GOP establishment versus Trump. And you don't get more establishment than the party's rules committee. I mean, that is – now, it depends on how passionate this never Trump spirit is in that particular circle and in April. Again, if the never Trump hashtag and the opinion essay after editorial about never Trump is to be believed, there are Republicans who think that if Trump is the nominee, that will destroy the party. I'm more inclined to think that if they try to do political tricks to cheat Trump of a nomination that he earns through votes, that will destroy the Republican Party. But it depends on how firmly held that other belief is. If people think nominating Trump destroys the party, they'll risk fucking with the convention rules if they can pull it off. Is that likely? I'd say about as likely as, Donald Trump was to be the nominee 6 months ago, but here we are.
In 2012, there was an establishment effort to change the rules significantly. I believe that's where this 8-state minimum came from.
Yeah, it was the Ron Paul thing.
Ron Paul's people were trying to fuck with the delegates, and the party people had to go to all the different state conventions to make sure they had everyone lined up. What are you going to say, Josh?
It was the Nevada delegation, too. They were supposed to cast 25 votes for Romney, and then they did a poll, like a whip count right before, and 22 were for Ron Paul.
Yeah,
The
it was
delegates
amazing what they
just...
did. Like in Iowa, where Romney supposedly won, then Santorum won, but then Paul ended up getting all the delegates. So this has been done to a certain extent before. So, Peter, do you think they're willing to go even further this time around to stop what they believe is a destruction of their own party?
No, because parties exist to win elections, and basically saying the guy who's where he is because everybody wants to vote for him, we're going to get rid of that guy, and we're going to haul in someone who nobody really was that much in favor of to begin with. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense.
Has Donald Trump won a 51% majority in any state?
I don't think anyone's won 50% in any state.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was being rhetorical because he hasn't. So. Yeah, it's not as if the majority of the party doesn't want him. So again, the argument can be made that turning over those votes is sort of what the majority wants.
Primaries?
Well, I mean, open the window and yell out.
Exactly.
And
that's
the
question.
Who's winning, and the answer is going to be Trump. If the GOP puts their candidate, and if that candidate is named Donald Trump in the White House, then the GOP is in a position to do all sorts of things. There's a million appointments that get made. There's Supreme Court justice appointments. There's cabinet positions, yada, yada, yada. So whether it's Trump or Cruz or a guy from Mars, the GOP winning the election is still the GOP winning the election. And that prize outshines anything else.
Not if the guy who wins the office hates the GOP. Again, he loves the GOP that the voters who identify as Republicans, but the Republican Party officials, the big money donors, which arguably is maybe a good thing about his campaign, and the type of people who do these things like appointments and running departments, they're going to be ignored. There's no controlling Trump. There's barely working with Trump. Again, this is the argument behind sort of the Never Trump movement. It's not just because he said he was going to bomb civilians or because he played footsie with KKK, although that did have a lot more to do with it. They're like, we like our racism much more subtle and implied. So I don't know. I kind of think that the Never Trump people, their anger and frustration at just losing control of this election might very well, to pardon the pun, trump the anger of the sort of voters that Trump is drawing in. Because what good is holding this position of power if the fucking Yahoo you got running it is going to appoint, his sons or his sister or this guy he used to play golf with instead of, the general who you've been grooming for 40 years to be whatever the fuck. So
yeah, I think you're.
I mean, you could be right, Peter. You're probably right, but
I think
this is a different thinking outside the box.
More authority than maybe we want. I think we also are buying a little too much of the Trump bullshit. We've talked before. I mean, the guy has done some decent business. He's got a large organization. He cannot be this big an idiot and have pulled that stuff off. There's another Trump in there, and there's going to be elements of that Trump running the government.
From your lips to Trump's ears.
All right, let's.
And I've got a resume in it.
Yeah, that now would be the time to apply for a cabinet position in the Trump White House. So let's leave it on that. Join us next time. We'll talk about the Democratic debate on Univision, the upcoming Republican debate. Those are always fun. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for reading Latest.com.